Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of the iSphere, where we were actually having a bit of a discussion about what we were going to talk about this week, because Twitter just seems to have, continued.
It's the world's slowest implosion.
But it's amazing because we've all got front row seats to it as well. So we decided that we might want to mix up a wee bit because nobody really wants to hear about Elon Musk and Twitter two times in a row.
2 weeks in a row.
So we thought, what's a game that we've both played? And Joy, you were saying that you're getting back into Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes.
And we were like, fuck it, let's go with that. So
yeah, it's also been requested. I will point out it's been requested. If you want us to discuss something, go to the iSphere Tumblr or even the Twitter for as long as it exists, and drop us a suggestion for what you want to hear. I know the Arcane's a popular one, but that requires a lot of time and investment that neither of us have at the minute.
I have started watching it. I've done one episode. I watched one full episode of Arcane.
You're ahead of me.
But nah, it's something that I'd like to maybe just spend a day and binge. And take notes the entire time. But yeah, I think we can. Let's just start off with Red Dead Redemption. So you've started. You've played it before, all the way through, yeah. Yes,
I've played it all the way before, and then I had my heart broken by the ending, and uninstalled, and then it pulled me back. I wanted to be in the Red Dead world. I wanted to be riding my horse around, and I'm just putting off the end of the storyline for as long as possible. Micah Bell can stay in that jail forever. It's got to the point where I can't save. The game runs in the background because Dutch won't let me save at camp anymore unless I go and get Micah Bell, and I'm like, fuck you. I'm not doing it. So the game just runs in perpetuity. So if you hear a whirring sound, it's my computer exploding in the background. But yeah, I loved the world of Red Dead, and I also loved the Red Dead Online as well. I loved playing it until that went to complete shit as well.
Yeah. So, you know what? I kind of see Rockstar games are the equivalent of Breaking Bad for me. And that I really enjoy my playthrough, and then once it's finished, I find it really, really hard to go back and experience it again. I've never rewatched Breaking Bad. It's one of those TV shows.
I've never finished it.
That to be honest, that's fair as well. But I can't, every time I go, do I fancy rewatching Breaking Bad? I go, no. Because it was just I'm not sure if there's a certain, and you actually mentioned this on one of my other streams throughout the week, where it's the kind of narrative depth of something. It's almost exhausting to go back. I've tried, I tried to replay Red Dead Redemption 2, and I hit that long prologue, and in my mind, the prologue of Red Dead's really short, but it's going to the kind of farmhouse in the blizzard and finding Sadie. Is it Sadie?
Sadie Adler.
Yeah. Finding Sadie. It's then the Colm O'Driscoll factory kind of area and the shootout there. It's the train. It's the chasing the guy down. It's the hunting. And it's all I remember getting to it, and I was I kind of wanted to get to the open worlds much sooner, because in my mind, the bit where I was having the most fun in Red Dead is when I was out in the kind of swamps hunting the legendary crocodile and stuff that. Yeah. Whereas trying to put the time and effort in to just do the prologue just took so fucking long.
I have a mod that for PC that stops the prologue and it just launches you straight into the open world. Because it's very long. It's a very, very long intro.
It's tutorial. It's 2-3 hours almost.
It is, yeah. And it's good storytelling, but once you've seen it the first time, I feel it loses
the magic,
the impact.
Yeah.
Because the first time you're playing, you're oh, holy shit, this is insane. You have immediately, it starts with the death of the member of the gang, and you're riding out into a storm to try and find shelter. And then you witness Sadie Adler, who becomes one of the new members of the gang and everything else. And spoiler alert for anyone who's not played, but like her husband has been killed by this gang, and she's hiding in the basement basically. And one of your other people, Micah Bell, accidentally sets the house on fire, and then it's you right off into the distance, and it's one of the opening lines Arthur uses for Sadie is. Don't worry, ma'am, we're bad people, but we're better than them. Yeah. So it's a really hard-hitting line where you're like, oh, you're playing as a bad person.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the bad guys? Yeah, and it's really fun. Like, I love these sort of characters who know, like, Arthur especially is such a good character.
Yeah.
He's such a good, complex character. But the intro, once you've done it at one time, I feel loses impact. I think if you were able to skip it, if the game just gave you the option to skip it, it would be great. Mm-hmm. But they don't. They make you redo it every time you want to replay the game.
Yeah.
And
which I can see why, because I mean, they put a lot of effort into modelling those cold horse balls that shrink and like. And to be honest, I remember when the game came out, and was it a 2018 game?
I think so.
That's amazing. But yeah,
it was really like I feel terrible for everyone that did crunch on that game. I feel so bad for them. But it is honestly like my computer was brand new back then. I had the best video card you could get. I had all the RAM. I had everything, and my computer cannot run it in anything more than like the lowest graphics setting. Yeah. Otherwise, the processor just dies.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous, gorgeous game. And I honestly, when the pandemic hit, I installed it so many times just so I could walk around outside. And I still do that. Because there's a lot of,
Like, it is an amazing, from like a landscape perspective. Like, the environmental design of Red Dead is stunning.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And there's so many mods. There's so many great mods that just turn it into a horse girl game. And you can just ride around on your horse and pick flowers and go walks and like go fishing and hunt, and it's like, oh, I don't have to do anything. Like it literally just turns off Dutch, and you're like, this is the best way to play this game.
Funnily enough, you remove the root of all problems for the gang, and it's a nice gentle game. Like I like how you were talking about how Arthur's like a really good character, because like I think
he's such a good character.
Because he starts off as way more of a baddie, and you kind of see him like mellow out as he becomes a bit more mature, and then he starts getting like distanced from like Dutch. He becomes a little bit more skeptical.
Depending on how you play.
Yeah.
I was playing an arsehole, it just gets worse.
Yeah, no. That's fair. I forget that there's a morality system in it as well.
Yeah, there's a morality system that's actually really good. But it's really, I always play Arthur as good because he's the character that I call as my favorite character in games, which is the sad dad. So like in Dishonored, I love Corvo because he's a very sad dad character who's lost his wife and he's got his child and everything. Which, spoiler, if you've never played Dishonored, Emily is Corvo's daughter. And I love the kind of the conflict with him where he's like, I'm a bad person, but I'm doing it to protect the people I love, because the whole idea of the gang is that they have this idea of being free from the government, and they don't agree with like the police and a lot of other things, but they're also just fucking thieves. Like they're just, they're thugs and they're brutes. But you have Arthur who shows that he's intelligent, but he tries to hide that he's intelligent because he knows that's not what Dutch wants from him. And it's really interesting to see how you have Hosea, who's the other head of the gang, who is also kind of, he's on his way out. It's implied that he's got like consumption or lung cancer or something. And you can see him trying to educate the people around him and being like, be more than a thug, like be smart with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you have Dutch that's just like, do as you're told.
Yeah.
I'm the brains, do as you're told. And you can see the conflict in Arthur, even when you play as a bad character, like the morally repugnant character, you see him resenting Dutch for taking advantage of him. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things at the very end of the game when Arthur is, spoiler alert, Arthur dies. And it's the last thing he says to Dutch is, I gave you my all. And his all was not enough. And that, When I was playing that the first time, I was in full denial. I was already writing fan fiction in my head on how to fix this. I was just like, my Arthur doesn't deserve this because my Arthur helped a lot of people. Like, he does a lot of bad things, but it's because, how much of it is because he's in a bad situation? How much of it is because he was raised that way by a criminal mastermind who's gone off the deep end? It's just such a good. I love how complex it is. Like, I'm one of those people that loves morally grey characters who are truly morally grey, and you have the choice in games to take them one way or the other. And I always drag them kicking and screaming towards the light because I love that. It's so good.
The one thing that I do like is obviously those kind of morality systems have limits when it comes to the plot, because there's not a good way that you can address how Arthur actually gets tuberculosis, because he obviously goes to the collection. The gang's running a kind of collection loan scam, and Arthur goes to pick up the money and ends up beating up this farmer who has TB, and he gets TB on the back of it. And it's, like, I don't mind it because it's like from a plot point, but when like everything else that Arthur does has this kind of, can go about it two different ways. I mean, there's some missions in the game where it does push you down a very like narrow funnel of like what it wants it to be, but I suppose that's always the risk when you have like a morality system in a game where you're giving that player the freedom to play how they want, and then for the purpose of the plot to actually get you to where you want to go, you have to have this like really narrow funnel.
Yeah, I can see it from that. I can see it's frustrating because I would be like, because I'm so far, when I get to that game, I've already invested hours in Arthur's playthrough, and he's like full on, like, exactly. Bar's like full, like on the light side, because I've been saying hello and petting everyone to everyone in the streets, and I've been petting every dog and helping everybody, and then it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go beat the shit out of someone. But that's also the reality of Arthur's world, and it's really fascinating that he's almost kind of resigned to it because it's Dutch told him to do it.
Yeah.
And Dutch is basically God in his perspective. It's like, it's his father figure that he never really had. And it's really interesting to see how his death ultimately comes from his unshakable faith in Dutch and his inability to say no to Dutch. And then it's only after that event happens where he has this true kind of like moral crisis where he's like, why the fuck was I beating up a sick farmer?
Yeah.
For money, because, we're running a money, like, he's like, this isn't like honest. Like, he has a really interesting view of like what is honest and what is not, and it's like that kind of like, oh, we're outlaws because the government's corrupt, but then you have, oh, they're scamming poor people out of money, or oh, they're taking, they're rustling people's livestock, and you're going, your idea of what you are is completely not accurate. And it's really interesting because you have, again, Dutch is the person that is weaving this kind of like, oh, we're the good guys. We're living free. We're outside the... And you can tell it's like a kind of almost like a cult-like situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the closest... Like, that is the closest that you're probably going to get to an accurate description of the gang, is that, like, they're... Like, I feel like Dutch himself almost doesn't... Like, it's almost like he's aware of it, but he's also very aware that he's got to convince everyone else that there's, like, an ideology of this freedom that he kind of pushes to the point where he does wrap himself up in it as well. But I do feel like there is
himself of his own lie.
Yeah, but like, I mean, one of the things that I thought was like really, like, it kind of opened up the characterization of Dutch for me is when you find his kind of diary where he's writing all his speeches, and his speeches contain things like dramatic pause. Like, he's got all of the deliberate pauses, and it's all written down and planned.
It is.
Which I think is a really good kind of like characterization point, because like,
it
means that on one hand he does put a lot of effort into the character of Dutch. At the same time, he's extremely meticulous about how he presents himself to the rest of the gang.
It is, and it is from a, like I was saying, it's almost like they're in a cult. They are in a cult. They're in the cult of Dutch. And Dutch is also in his own sort of thing. And it's, some people get really frustrated with like, well, how could you not see that this is the way that it is. And I have some personal insight into that. I've mentioned it a couple of times on my blog that I was, kind of raised in that kind of new agey, culty kind of section. Like, I had a lot of stuff in our family. We had a lot of like medical trauma, so my parents started avoiding doctors for a while. And they went full on like angels, crystals, everything to help sort of thing. And unfortunately, that meant I was exposed to a lot of really warped people who, they sell you the cure for cancer. They sell you, they're like, oh yeah, if you just take, if you put crystals in your water, you'll be healed, sort of thing. And I was in that for a very long time. And it's very easy when you are young to believe that these people are telling you the truth because, they're the adults in your life. Why would they lie to you? Why would they hurt you? Adults are, you're taught to believe from a young age that adults, have their best interest for you. And if you grow into an adult who's never had that questioned, it's very, very difficult to shake that worldview and that sense of loyalty. And to me, that's exactly what you see with Arthur. Because from reading Arthur's journal that he, Dutch and Hosea picked him up on the street when I think he was about 12 or something.
Yeah.
And they just fully took him and were like, oh, you can be a pickpocket. You keep doing that. You can be our little like gopher. And then when he starts growing up into this big burly man, he just becomes Dutch's muscle. And he's never had anyone to say, apart from perhaps Mary, who is, his love interest, to actually just turn around and go, you know what, you're actually better than this. Yeah. And I feel like there's multiple instances, again, where you learn through Arthur's journal that he did try to do things the right way. And then he always got pulled back in because something happened that made him aware of, I don't belong to anyone else. I don't fit with the outside world. And that was something I could kind of like, when I was in my 20s, I was coming out of like the worst of a lot of the new age stuff. And I still am in that world with, I'm side by side with it because of my faith. And like, but it's weird to be like, oh, it's weird to be on the other side. It's very alienating to be on the other side. And for me, Arthur's character is done so well when he goes through all these stages of grief, when he realizes that Dutch isn't actually who he believes he is. Because Dutch has been his world for the longest time. Dutch has been his reason for, getting food, shelter, clothes, like all these things. And you have Hosea, who is also a morally ambiguous character, but he's also trying to be like, be smart, learn to read, learn to write, like do smart scams, work smarter, not harder. You're not just a punching machine. And Dutch doesn't like that. And it's really interesting to see how Hosea at the end is trying to pull people away from Dutch's fantasy, but he doesn't get to because, spoiler alert, they're all bad people in the way that, most stories
they all end up, they all end up
die,
To be honest, I actually think timing Hosea's death was actually, it came at the absolute right time in the story for it to go more downhill. Like there's a couple of things that they nailed. I'm trying to remember when they save the Irish boy. I remember they save
Sean, yeah.
And then Sean dies. Sean dies in the middle of the kind of second town, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
He gets shot, and then Lenny and Hosea end up dying at the bank heist in Saint Denis. I'm trying to remember all the place names. And yeah, I think like there's this point where I think a lot of people play the game up to. I think they go to Valentine. Is it Valentine? It's one of them. Fuck.
Valentine's the first town, yeah.
Yeah, no, so what's the second one? There's the second one where it's like the fields and the
there's Strawberry.
Yeah,
which is where you have to go to free Micah from.
Nah, it's not that one. It's the other one. It's the one in the kind of bottom right of the map that's got where you go fishing. Rhodes. There you go.
Rhodes, yeah.
Yeah. Rhodes. So like, I feel like a lot of people get to Rhodes where the gang's probably in its kind of it's at its height, I suppose, for it. Because Sean's still alive, everyone's good. You go fishing with Hosea, and people kind of like to use that part of the game as their base to basically do all the other stuff. And then, of course, as you start to go into Saint Denis, that's when things go pretty downhill.
That's when things go skew up. I actually make a point when I first start playing. I ignore all the quests and I go to Saint Denis and I just enjoy it. Like when we're still in Horseshoe Ranch, I just ride off and I'm like, see you later. And I don't come back for several weeks. And then, you get all the gang coming to look for you. And I'm like, I get so annoyed. They're like, oh, Bill's been kidnapped again. And it's like, fucking Bill. Like,
who gives a fuck about Bill?
They do all these things to try and pull you back. And I eventually got a mod that turned all that off. So that I could just be in silence and just be like, I'm just going to go hunt for a month and I'll see you later.
Yeah.
But it was, it's such a beautiful world. And by the time you get to Saint Denis in the plot, you don't get to enjoy it because Arthur's got that deep rumbling, something's not quite right cough.
To be honest, that's a thing that's also impacted a second playthrough, is the moment you start to hear that cough, you're like, It's like, because I think for a lot of people in their first playthrough anyway, there wasn't oh, this is what's happening. I think we all probably knew that Arthur was going to die, but like, I know
we knew
that,
because he wasn't in Red Dead 1.
Yeah, exactly.
We knew that.
But like, at the same time, I think we were maybe expecting it to go a wee bit different. And then like
a glorious shootout.
Yeah, something like that. To tell you, like, I mean, maybe we're jumping a wee bit ahead, but like, I thought they did Arthur's death a lot better than they kind of did John's death in Red Dead 1. I remember John's death in Red Dead 1 almost being so random, like, just because the whole army was there. Is it not like the army and then you get the Deadeye? I remember that being really, like,
it was. It felt as if it was. Oh, you've got to wrap it up real quick, and these, it's kind of the expectation from these Western movies is that the bad guys always die, and that's what Rockstar were trying to do. They're trying to stick to these. Well, these people don't get to live a happy life because they are bad people. Yeah. They've done terrible things. The fact that you get attached to them is just a testament to how well the characters are written and how likable their good moments are. And I think it's also just that, it makes them, they're very human. They're very, very kind of humanized. Like, and I remember thinking, because at the end of Red Dead 2, you can play as John for a while.
Yeah.
And I remember
a while.
More for me than the entire Red Dead 1, because the entire Red Dead 1, I didn't really give a shit if John died. Playing that outro epilogue with John, I was like, fuck you, this is not how this ends. I put so much work into being a good person.
I find
it just falls apart.
I find it quite funny that like, back when Red Dead 1 was released, or Red Dead Redemption with John, it was like, people really, like, when the moment John died, everyone was like, I hate Jack, I really want to go back to playing as John. I had the same thing for Red Dead 2. I was like, give me Arthur back, because like, when there was the one thing, and I thought Red Dead 2's epilogue was too long, to the point of it was kind of taking the piss. Like, I get needing it. I didn't expect it to be such a direct, you finish the epilogue and then Red Dead Redemption 1 starts. I thought that was weird. Like, I was expecting there to be like a fairly sizable gap, so that like John could still be a kind of outlaw in his spare time and then get hauled back in for Red Dead 1. But I think the epilogue ends and he's pretty much like...
It could have been its own game. It's so lengthy. It could have been like its own little DLC or something that it was. You didn't need to play it to finish the whole game, because it was... I liked it, but as Robin Wing points out in the chat, it took 2 chapters to finish an epilogue, and I'm like, narratively, that's not good. If your epilogue requires 2 chapters, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice if the epilogue was you build your house, and then you get into the rest of Red Dead 1, but you have this whole thing where it's John and Abigail fight and break up, and you're working for a different rancher, and like, it's all fun gameplay, but like, from a narrative standpoint, it's too long.
Yeah, but that was the thing. I thought that the epilogue ended up dragging out to the point where it was taken away a wee bit from like Arthur's story a little bit. Like, there was there was the kind of big sacrifice that allowed John to get out of there. But then there's the kind of, okay, now he's just being a wee farm rancher, and then he's, you know, like, there was just multiple steps to his thing. I think if we started, he could have started at the ranch, and he could have then left the ranch after, you know, it could almost, they could have started it as he's almost settled into rancher life and he's put the gun down kind of thing, and then the ranch gets attacked and he has to go back to his old ways and then escape with his family. I feel like that would have been a better way to start it. But you actually get them going into Strawberry, I'm pretty sure, is where the epilogue starts. And it's like, he goes in and then he finds work, and then, you know, it's very plodding along.
I also feel like the epilogue makes Abigail very unlikable. And because you are trying your best for a lot of things. And it's, you know, like, there's one instance that really annoyed me when you were out in the cart with Jack and you're teaching him how to drive the horses and everything. And it's a nice moment. And then you realize you're being followed by people that are going to gun you down. And you shoot them and you defend your son and you get away. And Abigail leaves you over that. Or no, she gets really angry, like, how dare you shoot people? And it's like, they were shooting me. Like, I'm not going to stand there and just be like, yeah, I've changed my, you know, I'm going to let them kill my son. You know, what would you prefer, Abigail? Jack alive? Or, like, you know, it made her really unlikable. And I thought it was interesting because I'm like, maybe this is just how, because you've changed from Arthur, who's kind of always very fond of Abigail, like, he's almost like a big brother to Abigail, and the narrative's always really sympathetic to her from Arthur's perspective. And then you switch to John, and she's just this nagging, shrewish character. And I'm like, is that intentional, or have they just made her really unlikable? Like, is that, like, you know, the switch in perspective? I don't know, but it was interesting, and it made me really angry because I liked Abigail. And then at the epilogue, I was just like, I would not be marrying you. I would be like, I'll pay you child support, but I'm not living with it.
I'm gonna be with the lassie that cleans my back in fucking Strawberry's bath. But yeah, I think like I didn't mind playing as John. I think, like, John become, like, nearer the end of the epilogue, you can almost see John, like, there's flickers of John becoming the character he's going to be when he eventually goes to, like, Mexico. And that's, like, I feel like that's, like, John in Red Dead Redemption 1 goes on quite a journey from the start when he's in the kind of deserty town that I've forgotten the name of. And then he takes down Bill, I'm pretty sure. And then goes to Mexico where he does the whole revolution stuff. And he comes back to his wife, and that is quite a solid character. I think she sends him on a whole bunch of errands, like, immediately the moment he gets back home in Red Dead Redemption 1.
And back from this massive task. Okay, well, we need wood, we need sheep, we need What have you been doing? Nothing.
Tell you one thing that like, maybe, like, we can definitely still talk about the plot of Red Dead 2, because there's so much to kind of cover. It's a massive, massive game. But, like, one of the things that disappoints me the most about the kind of, like, modern Rockstar take on games is that I know that Red Dead Redemption 2 will never get an Undead Nightmares. And that that DLC for the first game was it's easily one of the top 10 DLCs of all time. Like,
it was so much fun.
The amount of effort they put into the fact that you had to go and, like, tame the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Like, that would have been, like, imagine, like, an alternate story with Arthur and the Undead Nightmare. That would have been amazing. And they
especially with all the witchcraft and the aliens that's in Red Dead 2.
Yeah.
Like, you could have had so much, like, people, so this was a really funny thing. I saw someone bitching about how people were, so the fandom for Red Dead 2 on AO3 is big, and the fanfic's great. And someone was bitching about how unrealistic some of the fan works were, and I'm like, there's UFOs in Red Dead 2. There's witchcraft. There's the embodiment of death. Yeah, sure, the horse's balls shrink and, you know, expand due to weather, but, like, you still can't get over the fact that there's UFOs and time travelers in this game, and you're complaining that the fandom's not being realistic.
And, like, the thing is that someone like that will dismiss or they'll allow the Rockstar to have funny Easter eggs, but then they won't allow other people to have or expand on those Easter eggs. I was just thinking, like, see the swamp. You know how there's a woman crying in the swamp. This the scariest fucking thing.
The scariest thing in the world.
You go over and like she just then starts shrieking and running at you, and you're like, "Oh Jesus fuck!"
And then all the people with like the voodoo faces come after you, and the cannibals and shit like that, and it's like, I know
you can't get to the shotgun fast enough. But like, how you could have just had imagine an undead nightmare that started in Saint Denis, right? Like you're on the outskirts of Saint Denis, and then you learn that the swamp becomes like more of a thing. It would be amazing.
It would be one of the probably the most scariest thing ever.
Yeah.
And I'm now sad that it's never gonna be a thing.
I mean, to be honest, that's something that I find really annoying about Rockstar's approach to like. And, like, don't get me wrong, I know as a business that they absolutely need to go to the thing that earns them the most money and, like, all the rest of it. But, like, the annoying thing is they wanted to try and, like, duplicate GT Online with Red Dead Online as soon as possible. So, like, Red Dead Online was, like, super half-baked when it launched. And I think they always do this, is, like, they have the story come out and they let everyone play the story. And then, like, a month or so later, they launched the online. I think that's what happened. And I remember I was expecting to have, like, quite a big, like, Red Dead Online's going to be really cool.
And it was.
Like, kind of. It kind of was, although I feel like the basic economy and things that you wanted to do, on launch anyway, for me, was absolutely shit. Like, as in, you had to get up to a certain skill level, or you had to get up to a certain skill level, or you had to get a certain amount of money to get a fishing rod, and it was like absurd. As in, like, the amount of grind you had to put in for like pelts.
Well, it was the if you wanted to buy anything, it was like 10 times the amount of money that it would be in the story.
Yeah,
and it made no sense.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure there was
you can buy gold bars to do the thing. Like, no.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was like there was like $100 or something like that was the cost of a fishing rod, and like people were going about like.
And in the game, it's like 4.
Yeah, whereas like people were going like, I need to, because the amount of pelts you were getting like 80 cents for like one good quality deer pelt. It was like the amount of hunting you had to do, because there was also not many NPC quests, so there wasn't any like people actually giving out the like, you know, you couldn't go and do bounties. That all came way later. And then the bow as well was like, it was
and the horrors of capitalism, as Tundra's pointing out, and it was very just unbalanced, and they made no move to correct it, and then it got worse when people started hacking it. And
oh god, yeah,
the hacks were bad.
The hacks were bad. The griefing was always going to be an issue as well, because like
also they made people had made a hack where if they killed you, they got all of your money. And it was even if you had bought the money, like if you had like bought the gold bars and everything, they could siphon that when they killed you. And there were so many angry people. And I'm like, of course you are. Like, you've put real money into this fake economy.
Yeah.
And it's just getting stolen. And the Red Dead's, their answer to that was, we're not gonna moderate any of this. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, you would log in and you'd get griefed immediately.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember there was I didn't play online long enough to see it at its worst, but like I remember like early days, like hackers just being able to like spawn next to you and fucking kill you, and like it was pretty tedious. But I feel like the Rockstar expected to like I feel like Rockstar were comparing Red Dead Online to a GTA Online that had been out for years, had like loads of players, tons of investment, lots of features, and they thought that they could replicate it by having a kind of half-baked Red Dead Online. Because like there was a lot of stuff. I mean, there was no real missions or no real anything on launch, to the point where there wasn't much keeping people around apart from maybe the love of the world. But like,
yeah.
I mean, imagine Red Dead Online with the same kind of like groups of people as like the folk who do, you know, role play in GTA.
And I will say,
it'd be way more fun.
When I was playing, I did. I was in a heavily role play server, and I had some really good experiences, but they did not outweigh the bad. But it was really funny because I don't tend to use my mic on games because people get weird. It's like, oh, it's a girl playing a game, and it's just like. But I had some really funny interactions with the role players, because you'd have guys when you walk in, they'd be like, they'd tip your hat and be like, ma'am. Like, it was like people were fully immersed in it. And you had some guys who'd be like, they'd be like, oh, it's a girl, and they tried to grief you, and then everyone else would just jump on them like, no, this is not what this is for. But unfortunately, they got overrun in the end. But I had people who were like, they realized I was a girl, and they would bring me pelts. I'm like, this is like having cats. They would just bring you dead animals and be like, here, again. And I'd also like, I had one really fun little, basically it was a kid, and he was like, everyone was kind of being mean to him, and I was kind of like, I just wasn't mean to him, I was just nice, and then he latched onto me. He was like, oh, you're a nice adult, I'm gonna play with you. And like, he followed me the whole way around Valentine. And one of my most memorable things was I was standing in the thing, and all I heard was his voice going, hey, watch this. And he just jumped from the top of the thing and just died. And I'm like, good job, buddy. Like, it was just like having your sibling on with you. But I had a lot of fun with those types of communities. It was really, really funny. And it was just ruined by all the griefers and all the people that were hacking, and like, it was just like, because it could have been fun, because there were people that did want the GTA experience. They did want to roleplay. They wanted that sort of immersion, and it just wasn't worth it because they had no way of fighting back against the people that were just destroying the servers, and it sucked. Yeah.
I mean, like, to be honest, I've always liked Rockstar games for the story. To be honest, I'm not that fussed about GTA. Like, I struggle to get the hype about GTA. I can't believe that GTA 5 Online is still going. Like, I'm amazed that there's still the same amount of buzz around it. Like, I kind of hate seeing it on the front page of Twitch. I feel like it's, like, for me anyway, whenever I go onto Twitch, it's like, it's GTA Online, and it's like football channels for like clubs in England who are live streaming on Twitch, and it's like that's what's on the homepage all the fucking time, and I'm kind of like, they must be paying for that, right? They like, surely it's like, I just feel like there's so many like indie games and stuff that could get some time in the limelight if the roulette wheel or carousel was a wee bit better. But like, I feel because GTA Online's been such a massive earner for Rockstar, we're never going to get the quality like kind of elsewhere. Like, I feel like Rockstar are going to struggle to make GTA 6 because why bother? Because GTA Online is still a massive cash cow. I think, like, I mean, when they make it, it'll sell. It'll probably be one of the like the best selling games of all time. But like, I think they're going to struggle because when GTA 5 was released, I feel like the news was still slow. Like, how is GTA 6 going to make fun of like cryptocurrency that has that has fucking come and gone and collapsed? How are they going to make fun of Trump's old news now? Like, you know, whenever GTA 6 releases, and it might be 2-3 years away from release, like, Trump's going to be a kind of distant memory. How is it going to be relevant to, like,
fingers crossed?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like, how are we gonna find like how
it's the joke with the Onion has, where they're like, satire is dead. So the Onion is now just reporting things factually because they're like, they can't, compete with what reality is at the minute. And I think that's true, like for GTA, where a lot of it was kind of satirical, poking at certain things. I don't think they can do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, like,
and you're right, that was a part of the success of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, how is GTA 6 going to parody Elon Musk? Like, it's, they'll probably have a self-driving car crash gimmick. That'll be one of it. Or, I mean, some people are thinking that GTA 6 is, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. My accent's not good on your audio processing ability. Sorry about that. I'll try and slow it down. I do also have a sore throat at the moment, so apologies. But I feel like the people were the rumor was that it was going to be GTA 6 VI, and then it would be Vice. Mm-hmm. Like that was the plan. Which, to be honest, it'd be really cool to go back and do like an 80s thing again. But I feel like that might be overplayed. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Tundra's that how would you parody Tesla? Just have one kind of car that locks you in and explodes every time you get into it.
Actually, I'm not sure if you saw it, Joy, but there's a really bad video going around Twitter at the moment of a Tesla that, while trying to automatically park, sped up to like just.
I haven't seen that. No.
Speeds up and kills two people. Oh
my god!
And it's captured on cameras. But like it's like they follow the car along the roads, and it's absolutely flying. It's like 120 miles per hour or something like that, and he runs over motorcyclists, and they're just dead.
I mean, it's tragic and it's traumatizing for the people inside the car.
Yeah.
And it just shows you that the technology that Musk is pushing is not ready, despite what he says. He constantly makes all these claims that all think you can see it with Twitter. He makes all these claims. Meanwhile, the engineers in the background going, "No, not ready, not ready." But he does it anyway because he wants to be an innovator. He wants to change the world. He wants to do all these things. It's like, cool, you can do those things, but do them safely and do them sanely. Like automatic driving would be so good for anyone who's unaware, I can't drive. I don't know if it's a mixture of my ADHD or whatever, but I have zero spatial awareness, and that is not good when you're in a car. So I made the choice to just not learn. And I'm thinking to myself, like, it would be really valuable for people who need carers, who need to get places. It's really difficult when you're disabled and you're trying to get places. And public transport's a nightmare. Self-driving cars would be so beneficial. But the way it's been done, it's never going to be good. It's always just going to be about some, small man's ego about he wants to be the first person to do all these things, and then it just doesn't work.
The only positive thing to take away from it is that it's probably pushed other car manufacturers to do it better. And I think that's what we'll probably find in the years ahead is that, like, sure, Tesla might have started the kind of wave, and there'll always be a certain, like, to be honest, fair play, that push to electric vehicles and all that. If it has whipped the other car manufacturers to actually move in the right direction, fair enough. But, like, Tesla, the amount of videos I've seen where, like, people are sitting in, like, burning cars trapped because the fucking door, like, only relates to the computer system in the car, and the computer system in the car's glitched or is dead, so you can't manually unlock the door, that kind of stuff.
It's purely that it's the aesthetic we have with Musk and people like him, is that the aesthetic and reputation, or the appearance, it's all down to appearance, the appearance of being successful, the appearance of sleek line, living in the future. That's all they want. They don't want to do any of the progress that gets you there.
Yeah.
And I hate the fact that he was born into enough wealth that he is the person behind all of these things, because he does not deserve any of it.
Yeah,
He doesn't deserve a scrap of it. He doesn't even deserve the clout that he gets for being, I was a founder of, PayPal. And he wasn't. He was the trust fund kid who gave money, and then as soon as he started giving ideas, they got rid of him because they were stupid ideas.
I did see one of the things this week is that like one of the kind of PR pushes this week has been Elon Musk has been cutting code for Twitter. He's actually been programming. It's like, has he? Fuck. Like, I'm sorry, but no, he hasn't.
I mean, anyone can open up a CSS thing and be like, "Oh, I'm coding." Like, it's not. Yeah. I like to think that some engineer just was like, they gave him the equivalent of a mat and some crayons, and they're like, "You can do some coding. You can reduce some lines," but it doesn't do anything. It's just purely aesthetic.
he wrote like "Hello World" on some README file, and then like that's it. But yeah, I mean that is the kind of weird push, but like it's funny you were talking about like appearance there, and like this, I feel like a lot of the tech industry and a lot of the like kind of industries surrounding the tech industry are all really built on sand in like a really frustrating way. I'm not going to go on the engineering rant that I did last week. I'm going to like try and keep it slightly not away from that. But the thing that frustrates me quite a bit is that it's like there's this just constant push to be doing the newest thing without any foundational, this is how this should actually work. I saw a guy tweeting and he's like, I am going all in on AI, right? What he says is AI is the fucking AI generated images that everyone's currently masturbating over. You know, you can go on the kind of AI generation ones that steal from 3 different people's deviant arts.
DeviantArt has now put into their system as automated, by the way. So if you're a DeviantArt creator and you are not aware of that, go in and change your settings so that DeviantArt does not give permission for the AI stuff, because they've auto included all your things in the AI art maker stuff. So
apparently they've changed it to opt out automatically now. That's
good.
Well, yeah, to think that
the fact that it was even not a thing in the first place is just like
like
so.
But I mean that like so someone said I'm going all in on AI is what he said, and it's like people being able to tell a computer I want an image like that, and then that computer being able to amalgamate stolen art from other people's. It's not creating art, it's just blending it. And then of course the next stage of that argument is these people are arguing that in itself is art. Being able to go and say, being able to give an AI instructions on what art to steal and blend together is in itself art. And I'm like,
I can see it from a transformative aspect where, you know, I've seen people compare it to fandom, where it's like, oh, well, you're taking aspects of something and you're making it into something new yourself. But it's like, yes, but it's not stealing. It's not stealing, and you're not turning around and then selling it with fandom, which is what some of these people are doing. They are selling stuff.
Well, yeah, and I mean, what they're doing is they've basically pushed the window from stealing people's art and making it NFTs to stealing multiple people's art, mixing them together, and then fucking selling that as an NFT.
Yeah, and that's the main difference for me, because when people were saying, "Oh yeah, it's just like fandom because you're doing," no, you are giving credit to people in fandom. You are not taking value from the original source and then making profit from it with fandom. If you are whatever, that, you know, I know there are people that do donations and everything else, but that, you know, it's a different thing. It's different from having the community of fandom compared to NFTs, which are actively destroying everything. And you know, it's a weird, you know, I think people that are comparing the two are just trying to find. They're trying to find something to say, well, look, it's been done before. And it's like, not on this level. Not to this degree, and not as, you know, kind of like, well...
And also, like, I mean, even when it comes to fic, there's got to be, like, fucking effort put in. Because you're, like, you're writing something. Like, I'd say that's a mile away from someone...
You're putting the work in for a lot of it. Let's be real, fandom is, you know, it's a love... It's, you know, a labour of love with fandom. Whereas the AI is just scanning everything, and then you're just putting everything in a blender.
Well, I mean, it's
like
it's like all you're really doing to create AI art is changing the keywords. So it's like, you know, the amount of fucking art that I've seen on being posted on Twitter, and it's like how come AI has perfected the feminine form, and it's just like it's just all these women with like, you know, it's like that kind of there's like a subreddit where it's like women's anatomy, bad women's anatomy, and it's just like women with like gigantic tits, like bigger than their entire body, like it's that. Elsa big breasts, people putting that into their AI generator. It is very it's very weird, and it's not particularly, I don't know, I feel like I'm going to be one of those people in the future that's like, AI, if we actually do have any sort of real artificial intelligence, I'll be like, of course AI can. If we have androids and shit, of course they can make art. A fucking machine learning scanner of a photo, I'm not convinced.
Sorry, Holly Mop's going bonkers in the background. It's quite distracting.
Imagine.
You just see the tail.
She's so happy. Imagine the back pain, Amelia. Yeah.
I mean, I was talking about my boobs earlier on Tumblr. The back pain's bad enough as it is with, you know, human-sized tits. Having anything bigger, I'm like, no, I'm out. I'm done. So I do not have to imagine as Tundra's saying. So
it's fascinating what, like, I mean, there was another one that I saw, and to be honest, it wasn't AI, but this guy had created a sculpture, and he's like he's a kind of like Andrew Tate side guy, right? But he created a sculpture, and he called it Vanity or something like that. And it was a naked woman who had, like, he'd made it very clear that she had breast implants, and he'd sculpted on the scarring, and she had her iPhone out, and she was taking a picture of herself, and he'd sculpted this woman, and he decided to call it Vanity, and like someone had just posted the quote where it's like, is it not quite incredible that you've like sculpted and commodified like a woman's figure, and then you've like made it about her being obsessed with her looks. That's not the actual quote. I'm going to see if I can go and find it. But it was.
While you're finding that,
it was a fucking atrocious sculpture.
I mean, it was like all the art a while ago where they just put all the famous like marble sculptures, and they photoshopped like phones into their hands and was like, oh, vanity. And it's like, as opposed to the men that carved these scantily clad women.
Yeah.
Like what, you know, it's such a weird, what are you doing? It's just such a weird kind of like disconnect where, you know, it's that kind of, it's vanity if it's this, but it's art if you know, if we're making a spectacle of someone, it's art, but if they do it themselves, it's vanity, you know. Which I was not too keen of.
There you go, Banrio Kialok is on it. You painted a naked woman because you enjoyed looking at her. You put a mirror on her hand and you called the painting Vanity, thus morally condemning the woman whose nakedness you had depicted for your own pleasure. That's the quote. That's John Berger who did that. I just found it as you posted it there, Banrio Kialok. Thanks. But yeah, it's exactly what this boy had done. And to be honest, the sculpture's fucking atrocious as well. He would have been better off just using Play-Doh. It is not great.
I
like how people who listen in on the podcast are just missing out on your dog in the background. They're missing out on the
Holly Mop action. She's going feral. She just wants she wants to get brushed, I think, is what is happening, because that means she gets food. So
but yeah, I think when it comes to like the world of tech and AI, and to be honest, I could go on a wee rant about something else if you want, Joy. I despise green tech. I think green tech is designed not to solve a fucking problem. So there's a big push at the moment for technology that can help sort out the world's CO2 emissions, and how can we use green tech in big businesses to reduce the amount of CO2 the big businesses go off of. And I honestly think the whole thing is a fucking scam. I think it exists to get government grants fed into them and then them to do absolutely nothing to actually address the problem. It really, really irks me. And unfortunately, Scotland can be bad for it. I think
there's a lot of it, and you see it a lot in. To me, it is the straw argument amplified, because you have all these people trying to create solutions to a problem that isn't actually the problem.
Yeah,
and because that is still to the date, like the bane of my existence is the straw discourse on Tumblr.
Oh fuck, man!
I still get harassed for old posts where I talk about needing a straw to drink as a disabled person. I'm able to manage it in small bits when we're on the stream, but that's also because I've done 3 years of physical therapy since then to get my throat muscles working as well as they can be. And like even then, I can't use a cup bigger than this, because if I do, I have to tip my head back and all my throat muscles seize. So I still have to use straws if we go out places. I still have to, and a lot of the time I'm like, I need a plastic straw because they're flexible, they're sanitary, they're not an allergen risk, and they don't dissolve, which a lot of them do. And it's a nightmare, because we went to a wedding not too long ago, and it was literally like, oh, can I get a straw for this? And the server gave me a lecture on why straws are bad. And
I feel like, fuck off.
Yeah. And it was like, well, this is an accessibility need. And it was basically, well, you don't look disabled. And I'm like,
whoa,
cool, thank you. Thank you for that. But it was this whole thing. And like, I had to literally, like, I'm at this fancy wedding and I was trying to drink a thing and I choked because my throat just randomly seizes sometimes. Like, you will see me on the stream if you're watching on Twitch, you will see me occasionally flexing and everything else. I'm trying to keep the front of my throat from seizing up so I can keep talking. So it's one of those things where it's like a lot of the effort that goes into straws is just completely redundant, because you will never be able to replace the functionality of a plastic disposable straw for some people. And I think with a lot of these companies where they're going, oh, well, this is eco-friendly, this is green technology, and it's like, okay, but that's great and all, but are you actually addressing the cause of the problem itself, or are you just coming up with a band-aid?
I mean, I think someone was saying it earlier. Nesclaw was actually saying it. Like, one person's carbon footprint is a kind of drop in the bucket when there's. This is the thing that annoys me about kind of green technology, or what people classify as green technology. And I think I've spoken about it before, but there's a company in Scotland that they wanted to come up with an app that would help organisations calculate and reduce their CO2 emissions, which seems fair enough. You need to understand how much CO2 is actually getting put out for you to then take steps to then reduce it. So I can see how technology would help in that regard. But instead of actually targeting what the problem is, which is like looking at the supply chain, understanding how much CO2 is being used. Let's say you've got a fleet of trucks, or let's say you've got a group of servers that are all using a certain amount of electricity. That translates to that amount of CO2 being put out, etc. What instead they decided to do was create an app where teams in the office could compete against each other for how many steps they'd taken, and whether the team was recycling, and whether the team was using public transport, and how many like steps were they getting in, and there was points, and there was so much development time dedicated to like we're going to create a scoreboard and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, and how is that actually addressing like what the organisation is doing? You're just pushing it down to the people in that organisation and whether or not they take a bus to work. That's not the same. Like,
again, brings it back to the individual being responsible as opposed to the actual company.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense to have it be, oh, well, actually, we're going to make it into a competition to see which department can be the most eco-friendly. How about you actually address your company and your product and the stuff that you're doing? And like, it's like when Coca-Cola has these things out about how like, oh, don't pollute. And it's just like, you are the biggest source of pollution.
Yeah.
Literally, like, it's like when Nestle was like, oh, conserving water. And it's like, you literally go into drought areas, you buy their water and then you sell it back to them at up price. And it bugs the life out of me. It really, really. I mean, I have a thing on my Patreon. It's pretty old now, and it's an article you can read for free that I wrote, and it was the mason jar aesthetic, because a lot of these kind of crunchy green hippie things, everyone thinks, oh well, glass is a good alternative. Not all glass is recyclable. So say if you drop a wine glass, or even just like this guy, you can't put that in the recycling because it's been treated a different way from recyclable glass. Because if you put it in the recycling, it gums up the machines that do the glass recycling at the facility. So then they have to spend thousands on fixing it. And it also means that if any of this type of glass gets in with the other recyclable glass, it makes the other glass weak and it can't be used again. So there's a lot of stuff that's in a lot of the eco communities. Oh, use glass for this. And it's like, okay, but how's the glass being made? Yeah. And a lot of the mason jars are fully recyclable. They're made from the glass that can be recycled. A lot of the mason jar stuff that you can buy in hippie stores aren't actually mason jars. They're coloured glass, which have been treated with a different type of heating. It's a different heat point, basically. And it's got a different chemical in it, which makes it non-recyclable. But, it looks cool and it looks as if it's a mason jar, but it's not actually a mason jar. And it bugs the life out of me that the aesthetic is there for like, oh, use all these things that can be recycled. They can't. And, like, you have to be aware of that. You can't just say, well, this is better than X because it can be recycled, can it? Like, we've just found out that a bunch of, like, the plastic bottles that we were told were fully recyclable aren't.
Yeah.
But then the alternative is, oh, we'll use glass. Well, not all glass is recyclable. So, like, most of the glass needs to end up in the landfill anyway. So it's not a solution just for the individual to switch these things. We have to change how we manufacture things at the start. The companies have to start at the core to change things. And it is my ultimate pet peeve because it affects so much of what I do. Like, I literally get people saying, oh, use a glass straw. They're not safe. Use a stainless steel straw. They're not safe. The issue isn't me using a plastic straw. The issue is the fishing industry dumping nets. The issue is Coca-Cola dumping plastic and all their other stuff. It's not the individual. You can, by all means, do the things that make you feel good, and it does help. Like, if individual people do their own part, it does help. But it's not going to be the solution.
Yeah.
And it annoys the hell out of me when people latch onto it as, well, if everyone just took responsibility, why is that not including the company? Why is it the individual who has to live in this society that has to make up for these companies? It's bullshit. And the company, like, I bought something the other day, and it was, oh, this is the carbon emission from this is completely offset because we pay for this. And it's like, cool. Maybe just don't send it by airmail. Why is it being
well, that's,
stuff like that bugs me.
I mean, that's another thing. There's two things on that. One of the things was in chat was Obelisk Killer was saying like greenwashing is like a big thing. It's like greenwashing is like when I see it from like a business point of view, it's like when governments are always keen to give out kind of like business grant money and stuff like that. And they're always desperate for like private companies to innovate and come up with like new solutions to how can we combat global warming and stuff. So what you have is companies like the one that I mentioned who get to apply for this kind of like government money effectively that they then put towards a solution that's not really doing anything. Like they're able to speak to it. they're able to, once they get up to a certain level, then the heads of that company get to basically parade around on all of the kind of speaking events that they like. Oh, at our company, we really believe in tackling climate change and net zero, and then that's all these people end up doing is they just go and speak at events, and it's like, it becomes its own kind of like gravy train. And that's, that for me is actually the thing that pisses me off the most. It's like how, like, there's a certain group of people who will always deliberately not come up with the solution in order to keep the kind of money flow. Because, oh, we're nearly there on the grant money now. Like, from a business perspective, obviously a business has to make a profit at some point. Or it needs to at least be sustainable. It can't entirely rely on kind of government money. And I think that's the thing that, like, for me in Scotland anyway, it's where I get really annoyed. Is like, a lot of the time the Scottish government fund these really good initiatives, but they're never sustainable. So they just need to rely on government money. If you want to give grant funding to a private company to develop something, that thing needs to become sustainable at some point. You can't just water and feed it. And it always ends up that it gets to a certain point and then the whole thing collapses because they're either not prepared to get it to where it needs to be, or, it was just a thing that existed so the people in charge of the company can go and talk at events. And that kind of annoys me.
It's actually, I was thinking in my head there, I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was, so I have an eco mattress. Our bedding is made entirely of wool. And we did that because dust mites can't survive on wool as well as they can other things. And I have a anaphylaxis level allergy to dust mites. That's the sole reason we did it. But there's a lot of these influencers at the minute are promoting these eco-friendly mattresses.
I've seen these.
And you see the kind of the claims that the mattress companies are making, which the people we buy stuff for are like our eco stuff, is they point out like, well, why would your mattress contain, like, they have labels like doesn't contain fire retardants. Great, cool. Wool doesn't need to have a fire retardant, so why would it? But then they'll also have things like doesn't contain arsenic, doesn't contain, and it's like, neither do the mattresses on the market. Like, they'll say things like,
it's like, doesn't contain as if the others do, kind of.
Yeah, it's like, oh, this is free from this, and it makes people panic and think, oh, does my regular, I mean, there was that issue recently with a fiberglass mattress where the fiberglass was getting through the casing and people were getting fiberglass on their skin. That was bad. But most of the time, your mattresses are perfectly healthy and safe. Like, the only reason you might need to switch to like we did with a wool one is if you have major allergies. But it was like they use this kind of like doesn't contain cyanide. And it's like, does the one that you buy at like Slumberland have cyanide in it? No. But they come up with all these claims to be like, oh, free from, as if it contains these things. And it's like, that's just green marketing. It's making you think, oh, well, this is healthier than the other one, because if this says free from, then the other one must have this. And that's not how it works. And it's really insidiously clever and despicable. And it's really annoying.
It's that kind of like really insidious side of marketing as well. Like, it's just, like, I feel like marketing as an industry can be fucking horrible.
I will say, I'm seeing the gluten-free claims. The gluten-free claim is for so that you know that if the factory produces anything else, because you'll get like gluten-free water, it normally means that factory also deals with things that contain, like, you'll get like the wheatgrass juices and stuff like that, and it's to show that those bottles are produced in a different facility so that you're not going to risk getting any contamination from the bottles, because sometimes you get cross-contamination with gluten from the basically just the injector. Like, there'll be trace amounts of gluten in certain things, because I people make it like all of my makeup that I have is gluten free, and people are like, why do you need gluten free makeup? And I'm going, well, I don't have celiac, but I have mast cell dysfunction, and gluten is a mast, it's a mast cell dysregulator, so I can't have a lipstick that has gluten in it because I will go into anaphylaxis. It's not for celiac, it's for this different thing. But some people also experience gluten sensitivity on their skin, And it's like, oh, right, well, didn't know that. But it's like people just use the gluten-free thing to be like, oh, this is weird. And people are claiming this is like gluten-free apples. I can see the produce. But again, are they being, it's things like, do people just wash all their produce before they get it? I don't think some people do. So there's little things like that. But yeah, it's the same with like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, this is organic and GMO. Well, it can't be labeled organic if it's not GMO. You know what I mean? And it's just like, but it's little things with like some places do take it too far. But with the gluten-free one, I will defend that because it's like, oh, why does this packet of potato chips say gluten-free? That sounds silly. A lot of potato chips use wheat emulsifiers to preserve them. The more you know. So,
I mean, it's like for me, I'm gonna definitely circle back on the marketing thing because I've got more to say. But like one of the things about particularly the kind of the green agenda or the green thing when it comes to marketing is like we mentioned carbon offsetting. And now I can go on another rant about carbon offsetting because it is the biggest load of shit fucking ever, right? It's for big companies to say that they've planted a forest or something like that, and that apparently offsets X amount of their carbon, and it is such. Not how it works. It's such. The worst thing about it is it fucking. What's the fancy beer place in Scotland called? Brewdog.
Brewdog.
Fucking Brewdog. Brewdog say that they offset all of their carbon because they went and they purchased a big forest near their factory up in fucking Aberdeen or something like that. And the worst thing is that it kind of started this trend of like airlines now do carbon offsetting and oil companies try and do carbon offsetting. We will never be able to plant enough trees to fucking catch up and with what...
We'd run out of space.
Well...
Like, where are you going to plant them in the desert?
Well, the problem is where they do end up planting them is what is referred to as climate colonialism. Because it's a lot of the kind of developing countries in the world who end up just getting masses of land purchased for these companies doing, we planted 20,000 trees in this fucking piece of land that we bought in Zimbabwe or whatever. And they then use that as their excuse. But of course, like obviously trees take a long time to mature. So it's not like they're not offsetting anything if they go and purchase trees that currently exist. So they have to be planting new ones. If they plant new ones, then they end up fucking, that's 20 years before it becomes an actual mature tree, And I'd say 20 years, that's generous, Like there's lots of trees that take a lot longer than that.
It's one of those really
Sorry, Panicorn's just told me that pine trees have no ecological use, which is really upsetting because I really like pine trees. That sucks.
Well, that was the thing about Scotland. It was there was an article recently that showed that Scotland had the most amount of trees it's ever had since I think the 11th century.
Yeah.
And that's good. However, they're not native trees. So they're not really helping the local wildlife, and it is that kind of like, it's the wrong type of tree that shouldn't be in this area because it's destroying other things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, it's like, it sounds really good when you say it like that, but then you go, it's actually not helping. It's just it sounds good. But it's that kind of it was a huge thing. Like there's this some people get really angry about this, but there's that charity where you can buy a piece of land and it gives you the title Lord or Lady of Scotland.
And
it's a conservation effort, and I think
one of the schemes is a conservation effort. I think there's about 3 of them. I get asks about it on Tumblr all the time, and it's like, what's your take on the buy a land thing? And it's like, on one hand, sure, if it's a gimmick that maybe goes to planting a tree or something, but I don't know how I feel about them.
It's that kind of colonialist, like Scotland still for purchase a lot of the time, which I don't like. But there's that kind of like, again, it's like, oh, it's planting a tree. Well, what is it planting? Is it planting, like you say, a pine, which, you know, as we've just learned, apparently doesn't have any ecological purpose? Or is it, you know, just preservation, like actual preservation, and not like the current, a lot of like I was watching The Crown over the weekend, and it was, like they show the Scottish Highlands, and it's like this great, wonderful, like it looks gorgeous, but then when you actually look at it, it's ecologically barren because it's been hunted to death and it's being preserved in a certain way because they want to preserve it as a hunting ground, as like a kind of a theme park, as opposed to yeah. And it's like, okay, well, is it preserving things, or is it just maintaining the current status quo, which is harmful? And it's that like kind of
the amount of like what's currently grown on some of the grouse moors exists to be burned to like get the grouse to fucking move, like that's like, to be honest, we could probably do a whole fucking podcast on. We'd have to do a lot of research on it, but we could probably do a whole one on just like Scottish land ownership in general is a fucking bin fire. There's such a small amount of people that own so much of Scotland's land. I think it's either slightly over or slightly under 100 people own something like 85% of Scotland's land, which is nuts.
And most of them don't live there.
Yeah.
It's mostly their hobby houses where they come to hunt and fish, and then they fuck off in their private jet.
Pretty much.
That could be a whole season of a podcast. It's just us railing against the whole thing. But
it's something that I'm desperate that we're able to address with independence, to be honest, but I don't think it's going to get addressed beforehand. I don't know how the Scottish government can look at land ownership in Scotland at the moment without kind of having kind of sovereign independent country powers, which kind of sucks. It'd be nice if we did.
It would be nice, and it's something that I hope I will see in my lifetime.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, but it was I'm reading the comments there. It'd be nice if they hadn't stripped the topsoil and everything. Yeah, that's another thing as well. Like, it was a lot of our farming practices are just destroying the soil. And we're now realizing you shouldn't be turning the soil and digging too deep because it destroys the root system. And it's like, oh, so we need to change everything. Everything that was implemented in the Industrial Revolution, we need to undo in order to try and save the planet. And it's like, you're being told to recycle, and it's just like, great.
I mean,
fantastic.
Starry Sky asked me to pull up the Wikipedia article for the Dust Bowl, which was like severe dust storms that massively damaged the ecology and agriculture of the American and Canadian prairies during the 1930s. And like it was a combination of like the natural side of things, but then there was a whole bunch of like failure to apply any sort of like dryland farming methods that like prevented wind erosion, and like I'm just reading from the Wikipedia page, but it's like basically the destruction of the natural topsoil by settlers of the region. They just like didn't know how to properly take care of the land, and that fed into it. And fucked everything up, funnily enough.
I will say, for the people that are in the chat going, this is really depressing, I will say that as Obelus Killers was saying, regenerative agriculture is a thing, and they have shown that it can have wonderful results in a very short period of time.
Actually,
I watched a whole documentary on it, and it was like they literally just let things go fallow for a while. It's not profitable for them, but they've shown that the regenerative, effects of it are fantastic. And it's like, cool, if you can, and a lot of these farmers that are doing it are pushing for more people to do it and to say, look, I'm actually having healthier soil. I'm having more output because of it. It's just different from how we were taught to do it. So there is a very dedicated and committed group of people that are trying to change the world. And I hope that they do make a difference. And I think they are probably making a difference.
Well, actually, I can speak a wee bit about that because I was reading an article about it. There is significant progress being made in Africa. That they were basically there was a lot of African countries that started to work together on preventing the Sahara from like advancing. So they've created what is being referred to as the Great Green Wall, and the amount of like basically they're helping to recover the land from the desert. I don't think
That's
they're
amazing.
so it's incredible, like the amount of work that's gone into it, because it's had to be coordinations from like all these countries, but it's basically they have taken up like a massive strip. I mean, recently, the Ethiopia has had the most success with 5.5 billion seedlings planted, which is nuts. And significant gains were made in Nigeria, Senegal, and Ethiopia. So, like, obviously, all of these countries need to work together, and to be honest, they need support as well. Kind of hoping the same with Brazil at the moment. If Brazil's president is slightly more left wing and cares a wee bit about the environment, then hopefully that can help protect the Amazon. And help reforest some of the Amazon, because I know that a lot of it has been stripped down throughout the previous president's kind of reign. But yeah, Brazil's changing leadership should allow something.
I mean, fingers crossed.
People always talk about the Amazon being like, was it the lungs of the earth is how it's kind of referred to? It'd be really nice if we could make the lungs bigger.
The way I see it, it was a post on Tumblr the other day, which was, remember when everyone talked about the hole in the ozone and nothing ever happened with it, and they were making out as if it was like a big panic that, didn't matter.
It was like a massive coordinated effort that
it was a massive global coordinated effort to fix it, and we managed it.
We did it, yeah.
We did it, and it's that very kind of, it's, you just need to get enough people on board. And I think we are reaching a point in our history where things are changing slowly but surely. We are seeing it in like the way, there's obviously still a lot of hardship and strife and terrible things happening. But we are at a time when I am seeing meaningful change happening through revolution and advocacy work. And I do think I don't think the future is as grim as we think it is. I think people are making an effort to fix things. Yeah. And I think that's important to remember, especially because it's so easy to get completely depressed and despondent with all of this. It's incredibly easy just to feel hopeless with all of it. But there are always people out there fighting the good fight for certain things. And, you don't hear about it because the doom mongering gets more clicks on the news. It's that kind of, you don't hear about it because hope doesn't sell as well as despair.
That is the thing as well. We definitely all of us do it. All of us like to doom scroll. The downfall of Twitter might actually help.
Yeah.
Because it's funny because everyone's been saying to go and join Mastodon, which I think
I can't figure it out.
It's a bit of a nightmare on a
I can't figure it out.
The user experience on Mastodon is not great. But I decided to join it, and it was weird because I feel like there's some people who I've seen on Twitter who I saw on Mastodon, and it was like people weren't writing like they were on Twitter. And I was like, this is almost a nice clean slate. I kind of hope that we can all start anew in this fresh new world.
Yeah, well, it's also they're not writing for a specific algorithm, because with Twitter, the more sensationalist and doomy you make things, it's more likely to trend.
Yeah.
It is, and Mastodon doesn't have that same infrastructure. I mean, it has something similar, but it's not the same.
Yeah, unfortunately, to Mastodon's kind of the negatives of it is that there's there is downsides to it because it doesn't have the infrastructure or the rigor that pre-Elon Twitter had. It also doesn't have some of the security infrastructure in place, which can be a bit of a pain in the arse as well. But then again, we're all on Tumblr, so that doesn't fucking matter. We don't give a fuck about security. And we never have. I mean, I suppose, it's funny, because when I made a post on Tumblr the other day about the American midterms, and I think I asked how America was doing, and I noticed there is a lot of doomerism that comes from Tumblr, particularly. Like there's a lot of it, but you guys seem to be doing okay-ish.
We're holding our own. The red wave didn't happen, and we're actually. I think we've maintained control of the
Senate,
the Senate, which is a huge thing because the
Congress,
incumbent president always loses they always lose that. So we're not getting the Democrats aren't getting the drubbing that they should have been getting, historically speaking. So there is change happening.
I mean, at the moment, I'm seeing that the Senate results, 33 of the 35 seats have been called. 51 for a majority, and both sides are on 48 at the moment.
Yeah.
Is what I'm seeing. I don't know if that rings true.
Well, I don't know. It's really hard. We probably won't know until next week, to be honest.
Right, okay.
But it's is
this just because it takes so fucking long to count votes, or how?
There is, but there's also a lot of propaganda happening with as Mothman pointed out in your post, the Republicans have been laying the foundation for saying all the votes are rigged. So they're forcing recounts and all these things, and then they're finding out they're actually getting gubbed anyway.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of kind of nobody's trusting the vote anymore, and it's because they went so heavily with they cannot win honestly, they will win by subterfuge, and it takes so long just because there's so much involved.
I mean the positive side of that in a good way is that I know that a lot of the Republican a lot of the kind of rhetoric for each of these was they went really hard on things like abortion and trans rights and LGBT rights and everything like that, and it hasn't caused that wave at all. So that's positive, at least. I
mean, they were fully predicting. They called it the Red Uprising, the big red wave, which is someone pointing out in the comments. Ironically, you would think of communism, but they don't mean it for that. They mean it for Republicans, and it's literally just them. They're all going, "Oh, the big red wave's coming," and then it's like, "Oh, Gen Z is ruining the America because they're voting blue," and it's just like, "Oh, so you lost," is what you're saying. But they predicted that they would have major wins, and they're not having that because people have been going out and voting, and it's a good thing that people have become more politically aware, and they are staying politically active in a way that they've not been for a long time. Because I think there's been it's the same in the UK as well. A lot of people have been very politically complacent because they trust the status quo to hold the same. And then it's not been holding the same because fascism doesn't sleep. They don't get complacent. They keep dragging and dragging and dragging until it eventually affects the people with privilege, and they go, "Oh, wait a minute, we actually have to join the other people that are also fighting against us." So it's a lot of people who are complacent before are now aware, and they are actually voting, which is good.
I mean, you've also got to think about how this will impact the actual Republican side. I mean, I've already seen people from the Republican side shit talking Trump. And Trump shit-talking Republican candidates. And it's fucking sit back, let them crack on. They can, let them rip each other to shreds. Cause
he endorsed a bunch of people, and it did not get them the votes they wanted. So they're now realising Trump is not as popular with the broader Republican constituents. They're realising only a very select few people actually want him. They are the loudest people. They are the loudest assholes, but they are not the majority. And a lot of Republicans are actually going, don't really want to be associated with insurrection and treason, and I just want to stay rich. I don't want to be a traitor. It's very much like that kind of don't know. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing that they're actually going, oh, wait a minute, this is the emperor's new clothes situation. The guy's not good for us.
Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering, it's funny. I remember when I think it was Mitt Romney going up against Obama in Mitt Romney sounded like an absolute nutcase, you know. Like
Yeah.
like when he was running, like I was like, fucking hell, we really don't want Mitt Romney to be in. I remember being on this side of the fucking Atlantic and being like,
Yes.
oh, I really don't want Mitt Romney to win against Obama. But like,
I was moving to that country at the time, and I remember thinking that would be the worst case scenario. And then I was here for Trump, and I was like, "Oh my
you've
God.
aged like 20 years
I've aged
internally.
20 years."
But like, I mean, that's the thing though, is that like, how does the Republican Party like claw its way back to? I mean, like Mitt Romney, whatever, don't really like care much for him, but like, you know, that almost it's a wee bit like here, like the Tories will never get back to the kind of David Cameron, like, you know.
The fact that David Cameron was
yeah.
the peak of the Tory party
Well,
for
you know,
our generation.
You know what I mean? It's like you don't want to say he's a fucking good guy. He absolutely wasn't, but like, he's not fucking Rishi Sunak or whatever the hell Liz Truss was, you know? It's
yeah,
like
it's gone from being scraping the bottom of the barrel to finding out that there's a hole in the barrel and the barrel leads directly to hell. That's what the Tory party has been recently.
Hell's too kind. It's actually just the barrel's floating in sewage.
It is.
Some of it's leaking into the barrel.
Hell's got nothing to do with this. It's literally just the sewage that Boris Johnson deregulated. So now there's just sewage all around England. So that's
there is actually. But I mean, like, yeah, I don't know what the move is, and to be honest, I don't think Rishi Sunak's going to be able to claw the Tories here back to like any form of sensibility. I mean, that died on its arse with Liz Truss. Sorry, one sec. I don't know what the steps are. I mean, the Republicans will have to do a lot of kind of like soul searching for them to be anywhere near the Mitt Romney side of things. Like, when are they going to get that? Like, they're not going to, like...
How do you claw back to rock bottom? Is the question.
Well, I mean, like, obviously there's always been BAMs, but, like, was there a character like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, back then? Was like, I mean, maybe Sarah Palin, but, like...
I mean, they've all... it's hard to say because in my mind they've all just been fucking nuts. Like, it's really just... It's like... I was watching something, it was on Hulu, and it was about the Watergate scandal, and they called it gaslit. And it was just fucking evil. Everything was just evil, and you're going... And to some people, that was the height of the Republican Party, and it's all been downhill since then. I'm going... The height of the Republican Party was Watergate. Okay. And it's like, I don't know. I honestly don't know, like, the answer to that, because as an outsider, it's very weird to say, oh yeah, well, the Republican Party had some good points at one point, because I have never seen them in my lifetime. And it's it's hard to say, like, for me to say, because my views are so different from what an American would be considered to be leftist. A lot of American leftists are just centralists as far as I'm concerned. Obviously not talking about the everyday people, I'm talking about the politicians. And it's bizarre to me that you have basic things like healthcare and minimum wage and all these things are not part of it. But then again, in the UK, my parents didn't grow up with these things. My mum was 5 when the NHS became a thing. So we're also in a position where we go, oh well, we have all these things, but we've not actually had them for that long, culturally speaking. But I think for some of it, it can feel as if we've always had that, and I honestly don't know how. I can't speak from an American's perspective, because I am a Scottish person living in America, so my view is completely biased, basically. So it's a weird one to try and answer. Like, Mothman could probably answer better, but to me it's always been a weird kind of question of like, well, how do they claw back to having a moral decency standpoint? Well, their view of moral decency is that LGBT people, trans people, and we shouldn't exist. So I don't know if there ever can be a moral Republican Party if that is their view.
Yeah, I suppose I'm not really talking about the morality aspect of it. I mean, like, it's when Theresa. Okay, a good example is Theresa May, and I know that there's probably not an American, like, comparison to be made here, but Theresa May wasn't particularly competent, but she had people in her cabinet that were that kind of slightly older, what you'd probably call sensible, almost competent people. Whereas, like, everyone in the British cabinet at the moment is an absolute fucking crackpot. You know, like, they're actual fucking nuts. Like, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has insulted the whole of fucking Albania in the past week by referring to Albanian immigrants and refugees as an invasion, which has now prompted mass protests in London from all of the Albanian people living in the UK. And it's like,
the sheer gall of Britain to accuse anyone of invasion.
Yeah, I know, right?
The
it's like,
sheer audacity.
But again, it's like,
just
like, that is the fucking caliber of person that is running the UK at the moment. Like, they just don't. You know what the worst thing about that is, falling to life? Suella Braverman is not Caucasian.
Yeah.
She's a person of colour. She's like Priti Patel, the Home Secretary before her. And
it's a weird disconnect. It's a really weird disconnect where it's, well, I'm not like the other, you know, it's almost like they put being British first.
But the worst thing about that, and I haven't worked out in my mind yet how to as a white person comment on this, I suppose. But, like, Priti Patel and Suella Braverman both being from, like, immigrant families, like, me commenting on their dislike of immigrants, I don't know where it sits, because it's like, I just see them as absolutely fucking evil. Like, I don't know how to comment on the racial aspect of it at all, because for me it's like, well, I don't know, but, like, I suppose that's when you maybe view it through more of a class lens, where they are exceptionally fucking wealthy, and they are, like, one of the things that I've always kind of said is that the women in the Conservative Party who have had to rise to the top, like your Theresa May, like your Margaret Thatcher, like your Liz Truss, they have often had to be more evil than their male colleagues in order to get the recognition within the party. And I think that maybe comes into it a wee bit, because,
it's like the opposite thing. It's like the Maggie Thatcher and feminism. Maggie Thatcher did not want other women to have power. She just wanted to be the only woman in power.
Yeah.
Like, she wasn't a feminist icon. She hated other women.
Yeah. I don't think that Theresa May or, like, that hated other women, but there's a particular, you have to back a certain amount of evil fucking policies to get the recognition within the Tory party, whether it's amongst the actual parliamentarians or whether it's amongst the membership. Like, this is how you climb the ladder. Because, like, Theresa May was Home Secretary. Theresa May unveiled the worst of the, she was the one who had the vans driving around with the, if you're here illegally, fucking report to the police because you're going to be sent home. Like, she was the mastermind behind all of that. And she was David Cameron's Home Secretary. So it's like, I don't know, there's just a certain level of evilness to be talked about there. I don't know if it's really been discussed as a phenomenon or whatever, but I feel like
it's what they're willing to give up to have power.
Well, I mean, like,
and you see it in a lot of, like, the at the minute over here in America, you have a lot of white Republican women going, well, I didn't think they would take away my right to abortion. It's
Yeah.
like, well, you voted for it's like, the classic, women who voted for face-eating leopards party, surprised her face is getting eaten by leopards. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
I didn't think it would happen to me because I'm above those people. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, because you erode everybody, it eventually gets to you. And it is that real kind of like, idea of that you are good enough to separate yourself from other people. And it's a really weird phenomenon to see them going, well, they won't do it to us because we are white. And it's like, they'll find other ways to oppress you.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's been a thing in the alt-right community where it's like alt-right women who are like the figureheads in the community don't like how they're being treated by the alt-right men. And it's like, have you ever listened to them?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's definitely a weird one. But on the positive side, I think the Democrats not losing the Senate is a positive, and I'd like people to maybe like think about that, because I know on Tumblr the moment I posted, everyone was really, really doom and gloom. But I think it's actually like it's okay to again take whatever small victories you can.
That's a big thing from from being any sort of advocate or any sort of activism. Every win is a win, no matter how small it is.
Yeah.
Because if you don't stop to recognize them, you go mad.
Yeah.
And you burn out and you can't fight anymore. And that's what they want. The opposition wants you to lose all hope. They want you to lose your fire. They want you to not be able to fight anymore. So every small win, even if it's not the big win, is essential and it matters and you have to cherish it. You can't just say, well, it's not the big win that we wanted. There is no end goal to any of that. There is just constant fight against people that want to destroy things. There's no... It's kind of like rapture culture. It's kind of like that idea that, well, if it's kind of like the in a story where you fight long and hard enough, you eventually get the happily ever after. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is reality. We don't have the happily ever after. We have keep the status quo as uneven as possible for as long as we can. And it's that kind of...
It's interesting. It's really interesting that you mentioned like rapture culture, because it's like I recently watched Band of Brothers. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. It's like the kind of classic World War II miniseries.
Yeah.
That follows one of the American paratroop like battalions or regiments or whatever it is. And it follows them through the whole kind of like, D-Day and, the Operation Market Garden, and then like eventually like the penultimate episode is when they liberate a concentration camp. And like that's hugely impactful, and then they go on and they end up in like sort of Hitler's main southern base, which was called the Eagle's Nest. And the last episode is after the surrender, right? And these guys end up going back home, and it's not so much a happily ever after. It's just like there was this aftermath where the war was over, and they just realized that like they'd been fighting for several years and now they didn't need to. But there was this, so what are we going to do now? Like they hadn't thought about it. It's one of the things where you mentioned when it was like kind of the rapture culture side of things. Like it wasn't there was an aftermath. It wasn't just like the end of the war. And like I don't know why, but it was really kind of depressing. Like at the end, you see these guys who'd gone through it all, and at the start of each episode, you have the real life counterparts of the characters in the show. So you have the guys talking, and it's like obviously a lot of them, like some of them survived the war with no injuries, and a guy came back and died in a car accident a couple of years after, and it's like, imagine going through like all that, and then like that. I don't know why I'm feeling like I need to talk about this now, but it was just like, it was a really big like, holy shit. Like,
I mean, they call it the Disneyland effect for soldiers now. Like after Afghanistan and Iraq, you had a lot of soldiers coming back from that kind of environment, and America's just carrying on like normal. And they're like, it's like being in Disneyland. No one else, it's almost as if civilians are in this kind of fake world where they're not affected by the things that they've seen. And it's a weird disconnect that we don't often talk about. We think of wars in terms of the narrative that we've been fed, in that war ends and then the good things happen. But that's not how it works in reality. You have to deal with the aftermath and the lives that are affected after it. And it's the true, it's true with all of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably got a broader definition as well. I feel like you can have the Disneyland effect for quite a lot of things. Like, I know whenever I've like traveled and then came back home, it's like things have stayed exactly the same, but everyone's just kind of like kept on keeping on. Which is kind of weird.
For me, it's a kind of a weird. So I have, obviously, we now know that I was born with a genetic disability. But when I lived at home in the UK, my disability was not as bad. It wasn't as noticeable. Now, when I go home and I see friends who have lives who've carried on, they look at me like, "Oh, what the hell happened to you?" And I'm like, "Oh, funny thing. My whole life fell apart for a brief time. My experience completely changed of life, and they want you to carry on as normal as though you no longer need a cane to go places, or it's things like there's people who don't experience the same things as you, and it's almost as if you're in a completely different reality from them, and they don't understand why you can't integrate with them, and it's like, well, because things have changed."
Yeah,
and it's a really weird mind fucky thing. It's absolutely just like with talking to my parents, like they have not seen me because I've not been able to go home because of the pandemic, so they've never seen me using a cane.
Yeah,
and it's going to be really weird if I ever have to use my cane in the UK for certain things, and they're going to be like, "Oh, well, you didn't need it when you were younger," and I'm like, "Yes," and then I got older. And
fun fact,
Jesus. It's really kind of like there's people that just don't ever leave their little protective bubble, and I don't mean that in a nasty way, like they're not on cloud cuckoo or whatever, but they don't ever experience certain things that completely alter your worldview. And would that we all lived in that kind of situation, but the truth is most people don't. And it can be really alienating to come back into that kind of situation where it's like so many things have changed for you, but it feels as if nothing else has changed for everybody else. And you commenting war never changes, yes. But it is a really kind of, it is weird. It is a weird experience, and I imagine it's weird for a lot of other people. For like, again, bringing it back into the activism and everything else, it's really weird to be part of a minority that is, you have to be radicalized to survive. And then you feel as if you're having, like, there's people that are supposedly on your side and they don't get it. So again, a good example would be the straw issue. You're talking to fellow supposed leftists and they're yelling at you because you're not doing the ecological, the eco-friendly thing, and that makes you a bad person. And it's like, how do you not see that disabled people's rights need to be part of eco-activism? Otherwise, it's not good enough.
They always talk about climate justice, and whether that is, making sure that disabled people are part of that, or in developing countries, that's another one. And it's like, how do you do an actual just transition? Like a big one that I've seen, and I've seen a couple of people, including one of my friends, but like they've spoken about not being able to have a vegan diet and getting absolutely monstered for it on Twitter. As in, like, there's people who are vegan on Twitter who very much look to insert themselves into discussions about veganism. As in, they'll make sure that they're typing it in as a keyword, and they go and hunt down what people are saying about it, and they try and start fights. Now, don't get me wrong, I reckon there's a lot of people who take the piss about veganism, and there's always the guy doing the joke about the bacon or whatever the fuck. But then
there's always the meat eaters that take it too far. There's always the meat eaters who make it into their personality, and they're just as fucking annoying.
Yeah, they are. They're just as fucking annoying. But like when you It's almost like the left needs to stop doing friendly fire. I feel like there's definitely a lot of that.
Because that's the thing that the right does really well, is that they solidify.
Yeah, they fucking huddle up
behind the evil, because they'll be like, oh yeah, well I can temporarily like they will temporarily put themselves with the worst case scenario to get what they want.
Yeah.
Thinking, oh well, I can drag it back to what I want eventually. Meanwhile, we're fucking taking pot shots at each other. Yeah. Because it's very kind of
there's a kind of like ideological purity thing that comes into play a lot. But anyway, right, before we do the wrap up, I think we need to lift the conversation a wee bit. What are you doing this week, Joy? What you got planned?
I am trying to get some writing done. Nice. I'm also working. I'm doing something that now that you brought it up, I kind of want to talk about it, but I can't because I'm working in the background. But I've got a secret project that I will hopefully be launching on December 1st. And I'm trying to get a lot of stuff done in the background. I'm also I'm sure some of you are in here, but thank you to everybody who is recommending corsets for me, because I'm looking at getting a medical corset for my back. So I had a lot of very helpful people messaging me last night. I think I got 100 messages from people recommending things like that. So I'm doing a lot of things for self-care, and also just a lot of projects for things that I don't have time for, but I'm doing anyway. So
why do we not? Yep, I sure can. No, that's good. The week ahead for me, I'm working a couple of days, which will be good. And I'm getting this charity stream organised. It's just it's like
I'm looking forward to being a nuisance.
It's hell for leather up until like I'll sleep after it's done. Until then, no sleep. That's banned. It's interesting, but
you realise their chat's gonna bully you into self-care if you're not careful.
Well,
they are gonna bully you. Yeah, I'll bully you as well.
That's fine. They can do that. It's more like, like what we're doing there. So we've already announced a whole bunch of guest speakers. If anyone wants to give me a follow on Twitter or Tumblr, you'll see a full list. And I dare say that Joy will be reblogging. I will be joined by Joy as well, which is excellent. So Joy will keep me sane or drive me insane. We'll find out.
That was the coin.
But yeah, we'll definitely wait and see. But in that case, let's wrap up this one. That concludes episode 21 of the iSphere.
Yeah,
we're getting
21 episodes.
Yeah, that's not bad. If you're still in chat, hang around for a wee bit. We'll be here briefly. But for the rest of you listening on the podcast, hope you have a great rest of your week.
Bye bye.